Okay. Thanks. We're in the 12th round of this heavyweight bout, and maybe you guys are feeling as punch-drunk as I am. But keep the quality bar high. I'm Daniel Frankel. I'm the CEO and co-founder of NextTMT. We're a B2B content marketing, all things all people company. And please introduce this panel. I won't put out the name, but basically in an era where apps are being disaggregated by big platforms like Amazon, Roku, etc. You can find them in pay TV companies like Charter. There is a whole chain of stuff that needs to be accounted for when it leaves your sort of direct to consumer playing field. And the four technologists I have with me are going to talk about some of that here today in the next 40 minutes. Since my memory is just shot right now, I do have some notes, and I'm not as deep in the weeds of technology as them. So if some of the questions sounds overwrote, because it is, but I'll just introduce them and let them take it away. First off, to my left here is Ravi.
Yeah.
Okay, close enough. Okay. He's had strategic partners, telco distribution for Google Ad Manager. Next, we have Zach Bannon, head of product and data for the CW network, which is over by Nextstar. And then we have Rob Collins, executive director of software development for Starz. And Scott Mills, senior vice president, product and engineering for digital reality. So we'll get right into it. I'm going to, the first one, I guess Zach will be the first victim. Look at, the fragmentation of just crafting identity. When stuff is, your content is viewed by other apps, and leaves your kind of owned and operated ecosystem. Talk about that, I guess, if you get a start specifically, how does that work? What changes?
Yeah, we've always tried to meet our audience where they are. We started streaming full episodes next day as early as 2006, but no one else is really doing it. We tried to expand to every platform possible to be on every screen. And now that includes syndicating our CW brand of our content to partner apps. And for ad-supported business like CW, successful outside of our owned and operated environment. It's just not as simple as collecting subscriber fees, which I think is what a lot of the market is doing. No offense, Tom, because you wouldn't be here if it was really that simple. Or sorry, Rob. We wouldn't be here if it was really that simple. We want to replicate as much as what we get from our own apps. But the question kind of becomes, what is each distributor willing to give us? So we need to get an IP address, so we need to get an ad ID, or are they just giving us basic content metadata? Then go cheat the channel metadata if we can't get that. So we have to make some really careful decisions about how it's going to impact our ability to deliver program.
So yes, as this stuff kind of migrates downstream, what is the impact on basic ad operations, like frequency ad?
Well, if we're not getting we're not getting what we need to continue record, it could be a problem. We lose the ability to know who the user is, especially as they're moving between different experiences. In some cases, depending on how the partner has set up their privacy settings or anything else, every stream could be kind of counted as a different user. Totally screws up frequency capping. An advertiser ends up wasting their budget, or you don't even bid because of that, because of the sort of the consistency. Our premium inventory is value from that. So it's like a relatively new fragmentation issue for us. It's a direct challenge to how monetize trying to figure out how to be in that space.
So Rob, you're kind of in the same boat. Starz programming is, available in a lot of the same places that the CW is. You face many of the same challenges. Maybe you can answer some of the same questions.
Sure. I mean, the situation with Starz is we are very partner-oriented. We set up from the beginning, more than 30 years ago now, as more of an add-on channel for, back in the day it was the cable partners. Now we're in the streaming era, so we're sense of identity, this is a Starz customer, but we're going to be getting from lots and lots of different areas. It could be from a technical perspective, it could be file routes, it could be API calls, it could be, every part is a little bit different with the shape and so forth. So our systems will aggregate that because the questions are the same. What content can we give them to watch? What's going to keep them from churning? What's going to keep that subscription going? And the sort of twist on that is that in our own DTC, the direct-to-consumer application, we have that on streamers. We have clickstream data. We have instant data. So it's as our systems have evolved to do that sort of aggregation and say who is the customer. We find that we can get a lot faster, a lot richer from our own things. That helps inform what we
ask our partners for and how we eventually get to that point of saying this source is who are they, and with that argument. Well, it's as they say, good to be Google. With Google TV, you sit in a monetization layer, a platform layer. It's a good position, but there are complaints from distributors that I don't know if hoarding is the right word, but I'll use it because I'm, clickbait. Then sort of controlling data too much. Can you respond to that? What's the perspective there?
First of all, thank you for having all of us. Thank the audience for the crowd here. I think the whole being Google is good, but being Google Ad Manager is better because we work with everybody. In terms of data hoarding, I don't know how to call it necessarily hoarding as much as having to navigate a very complex privacy and consumer landscape today. It's evolving all the time. Think about it. I feel like nobody actually has a full picture of the consumer today because of that. So I think people might claim that they have the full consumer journey. Like, let's be honest, nobody does. And that's for a real good reason, which is data is siloed in walled gardens today. And I think this is where our thesis is that distributors or owners of the glass that is closest to the viewership probably are in the best position to glean the best insights about consumers too. I think Google Ad Manager does well is number one. As I said, we work with everybody because we're able to work with everybody. We're able to be the neutral data partner for that, and then allow clean room combinations in order to create double-blind, privacy-safe insights. That, for instance, we have something called VVID that allows people to download and use these privacy-safe IDs to extract programmatic value from these data sets. So, and again, I said more about solving that privacy landscape rather than just thinking about this as a data hoarding landscape.
Thanks. When we get to that level, it gets a little challenging. And for the level of compute, it sounds a little intensive. And I guess that's where Scott comes in. You talk about this, you clean rooms and managing all this just from the physical aspect. Scott, how is this all managed on your own?
The other way. Great question. First and foremost,
context. Because I think everybody in this room probably recognizes the names that are this way. This one might be this way. Not my personal name, all of it's this way. This is not a commercial, it's context. So Rev Digital is the world's largest data center operator. We manage 310 facilities across 55 metros in 36 countries. Our job is that steward of digital infrastructure is make platforms that the industry generally controls that, and hopefully yours as well as we go through the context of the show. I just note that because we're effectively the plumbers of the internet. We get the job done when many people don't see, right? And that's the thing we possibly do is make sure that the digital infrastructure that runs for our digital economy runs better, faster, and more economic, right? So that's what we do. Second part, I don't know if anybody else was in here for the Akamai presentation beforehand. If you were, it was kind of interesting because I think a lot of times the conversation we're in, we talk about CDNs, right? And there's a lot of similarities about what's happening historic CDNs and in support of these types of platforms. But there's also a lot of differences that are emerging, specifically what we view as the inference edge. And what is the inference edge doing in order to deliver more personalized content? How do I make it more individual aware? Also simultaneously, how do I make it more secure? And of course, how do I make it more performant, right? So a lot of times data centers is a nice neutral jumping off point to these CDN networks where platforms live, right? We often, and certainly within our media and content division, we view ourselves, right? And this is an inward looking, this that, content lives in our facilities. It's increasingly refined there, and it's unquestionably served from there. Right. So in that journey, what we doing to help these types of platforms, modernizing, GPU infrastructure for new silicon so that we can create that new intelligent edge to better serve those end users. We also do this across, like I said, 310 facilities across the globe with local sovereignty, local security, local regulations in mind, so that we can help our content providers better serve that infrastructure, right? To serve that content to improve the overall end user experience. That's why we're here. And in service of these three flight gentlemen, of course, we're establishments.
Thank you, sir. Well, let's talk about disaggregation for a minute. Obviously, a lot of kind of hard work goes in on the marketing level, merchandising partnerships to distribute Starz as widely as you can in a pretty competitive realm for subscription video on demand. But behind that are some pretty complicated negotiations in terms of who gets what data and who gets what control. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the bare bone, the basic structure of those negotiations. At what level does a lack of transparency just not justify the only dilution? Yes.
Yeah, I'll go back to the point that how deep we are in the partnership. And it's sort of in the DNA of Starz of we will meet you where you live, and that there's, give us that data in different kinds of formats. We'll do the work to make sure we do it. And you asked about the bare bones. I'll start with really sort of maybe the gold standard of saying, here's the kind of data that helps out us the most as a premium streamer is watch data, engagement data. What are they watching? How long are they watching? What are they not watching? What's the affinity between the shows, and where should we put our spending and so forth. So the gold standard, getting that data and the kind of thing that we can get as first party data, we can even go beyond that. We can go, what sort of image will make somebody will click into a certain show, do A/B tests or that kind of thing. Generally, there's probably never a world where we get exactly that kind of richness from a partner. But when we're talking, our North Star is give us the user, the kind of engagement data they have with what they watch, and then as subscription status as well. We can build very sophisticated models of when a person watches this, acts like this, here's how they're going to react to an offer, here's how they're going to subscribe. But there's also some very simple principles of, if somebody's in a bundle and they don't watch any of the shows,
That's how it's on. Starz doesn't have an ad support tier. You told me that, right?
that's correct.
So that has to simplify things a little bit. For USAC, that doesn't apply. It's pretty much all ad supported at this point. If there are a few exceptions, that seems to complicate in terms of how you syndicate and partner content. That would seem to be a very complicated negotiation. Maybe you talk about that. What are some of the major points you have to agree to? What are some of the else?
Yeah, the first thing is it's like really key for us to hone the door when we do these partnerships. And we have like a killer direct sales team and a killer programmatic team. And we are almost certainly going to make more money by selling our own ads on the platform than by letting the platform do it. And I don't think there's a platform we've worked with that's really an exception to that. In terms of viewership, all the same kind of stuff you're talking about, right? But we need this added layer to help the ad stack work, right? So at the very least, we need to understand how we're monetizing on an asset level, like what the actual revenue delivered is, oftentimes because we've got licensing and some things that require us to keep track of that sort of stuff. And then that's as simple as like we give them a content ID when we deliver the catalog that they make sure to put it back into the ad request. And if we own the ad delivery with the partner, that actually kind of does the whole thing for us. We can use that content ID. Our ad server's got the whole catalog ingested, and we can insert any kind of metadata we want. But more often than not, that's not the case. So at the very least, I like to say something is better than nothing. I would rather have a partner pass back a super generic genre value like television than nothing at all. Some advertisers won't even bid if those kinds of values are coming back blank. And with like thematic channels or show specific fast channels, you can kind of hard code stuff like genre and title and things like that because it's not really going to change. So that's like pretty straightforward. But when you get into the VOD space, and that's sort of relatively new, I think, across the industry. Part of the reason I say that is now, like, as we're signing deals with new partners to have, a CW branded space with a VOD offering in their environment, they're like immediately trying it over to their engineering team and starting to build out the stuff we need. So they have not worked with a lot of partners doing this yet. So it's all pretty fresh, and we're kind of figuring it out as it goes along. Ideally, from a metadata standpoint, you would have them pass, anything and everything you can get, every bit of metadata we get from the catalog we going back. Like the perfect world, as we get into the contextual metadata space and break level metadata and allowing bidders to kind of target that for either something they want to buy, they want to be next to, or for brand safety. I think that's kind of the gold standard. I think we got a long way to go there. The IAB is continuing to try to mature the contextual metadata standard and how it gets delivered and how bidders can tap into it and stuff. I think Iris has done a great job and a closed network, but I think we need an open system. So that's where I'd like to see it go.
Thanks, Zach. Ravi, back to you. Let's reintroduce the conflict, the push and pull, the tug of war between platforms and publishers. We all want to get to a place of the sort of completely open, standardized data sharing architecture across the industry. But is that a fairy tale? Is that something realistic? Should we realistically expect a little less? What's your viewpoint on that?
I think open standards are possible. I don't think that itself is a fairy tale. I think this is not a technology problem or even a standards problem. I think this is more a business problem. So we have IAB standards. We have council's IAB standards that can go to the nth level to dictate how signals you talk about passing signals. That's an example of how we use it. Right? I think that exists. But I think there's distrust among people that have first-party data, especially like distributors, about sharing this data. That I think is the business problem. A big concern for these distributors or people that own this data is, will somebody actually take this data and weaponize it in this data, right? Or what is the value exchange? What am I getting in order for sharing this data? And I think this is where you've had countless open standards or open consortiums. There's some big press behind it, but then nothing happens because I think it's dispress. What I'm proposing is perhaps, extending a little beyond signals that we have today, where it's on a transactional basis. How can you actually read the data rather than think of data ownership? Whole data rendering to slightly more beyond signals. So today, right, like there's YouTube and there is Netflix. Each of them knows their own side of what's going on, right? But they don't know what's happening before the person got to that particular app on the platform. And that's the yes, right? But if there was a common data layer like this that allows the platform to bring context to these apps, then I think that can make a world of difference to consumer experience and monetization. So for instance, I could predict the form of frequency capping. So perhaps the YouTube app will now know that the consumer saw the same ad on a different app on the platform 10 minutes ago. So maybe don't show that ad again for the next hour, right? That kind of data rendering capability of an underlying data platform, I think they can go much better to ease the distrust that is there and push through between programmers and platforms.
Get out of things. So that steer this back to Scott and sort of the rubber meets the road. These massive exchanges of data between partners, these bundle deals. It seems like you can create sort of a really untenable amount of data and network usage overhead. How do you manage all that and keep it within the realm of doable?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I agree. I think I like the idea of being a business challenge. Technology is emerging right now. It's emerging at a pace that is both dizzy and sometimes confounding. But from a data center perspective, marketplaces and exchanges have existed and is central to our foundation for a long time. This is the most effective and efficient way to exchange traffic between two counterparties, counterparty A and counterparty B. It started with algorithmic traders, it moved on to other services, and now it's actively expanding into new types of data exchange. Would like to say that I understand the complexities of these free gentlemen's businesses and what that I understand the business and relationships across them. But for us, the answer is a little bit more simple. It's about physics. And when I mean physics, I mean about speak of like, how do I physically reduce the distance between two counterparties because the experience will be in your I would love to tell you I can change the speed of lag on Earth. Can't. So the one thing I can do is try and work with partners and platforms to do more effective distribution of the platforms across geographies, right? So that inherently, that plus the intelligent, inference edge helps to drive better experiences. Increasingly, interoperability that we're talking about to exchange values can be happening at an agentic control plane, right? NCP servers are going to exchange, we're going to negotiate who gets access to what. And that data movement, albeit fueled by new business relationships and potentially new standards, is going to exchange in new ways. And fundamentally, the operating premise that we have is when we enable those platforms we need to create new exchanges. The agentic exchanges could allow the exchange of new data in new ways, right? In a proximate fashion that improve the overall end user experience. And so that's, if you do that, and you distribute that across the globe in multiple facilities, multiple locations, hopefully on our platform. That's how, Daniel, how you view that infrastructure imperative. Of course, I also believe that is, dynamic network fabrics that make this exchange of that data easier, right? It makes it more secure because not private networks and not public networks. There's a whole variety of things we can do to unpack that overall value chain.
So shift the conversation to AI. So what we do. Zach, if you had a tech call where you were talking about advancing some search recommendations, which are coming pretty fast. And there's a lot of innovation there, obviously. When you bundle your product in ways that we're describing, how does it affect, gathering data about your users and showing them stuff helping them with their choices, I guess. When you're not dealing with the direct data going through the integrators.
The truth is we actually don't have a ton of control in those partner spaces in terms of how content is merchandised. So we really rely on a partner to own that merchandising and understand the recommendation space and all of that. I think with our own, on our own and operating apps, we've seen tremendous progress in using AI in kind of, I guess you could say, unexpected ways to improve recommendations. I think you kind of expect, well, now we're plugging GenAI into the recommendation system, and that's what's telling people to watch. And actually, no, we're still using the same machine learning algorithms that we've been using for a number of years. Obviously, we're improving them and developing them and adding more and more. But the metadata has really been kind of the key to unlock improvements. What we found a few years ago, we did just a simple experiment where We added a chat GPT. It was like GPT 3.5 Turbo, so not like a super powerful model. We brought it into our CMS and had it go through our entire content catalog and start generating like deep descriptive characteristics of our content, and maybe not even super accurate. It was kind of scanning the titles and a little bit of cast information to go figure out whatever it scraped from IMDb and kind of gather some more information. But it was able to produce these descriptors. And when we plugged that into our recommendation system, overnight we saw like a double-digit improvement in conversions. So where we put a recommendation if I was someone and it worked. And so that kind of like was the aha moment where we really realized that you need to having a deeper understanding of the content can let those same, machine learning algorithms do a lot more. So we're looking at like, audio characteristics, objects on the screen, tone, intent, mood, things like that we sort of, sprinkle throughout, sprinkle against the content, but also throughout the timeline of the content, and have found like just really unexpected results from how well that works. So that's been a really important piece for us. And again, it's really in our own operating space. And I imagine that whenever we deliver content to our partners, we're giving them a TMS ID, we're giving them sort of universal lookups. And I imagine they're doing a lot of the same kind of work. But with little CW, that's been kind of a pretty big breakthrough.
So, Ravi, maybe you could talk about Google, Gemini, how your latest tricks are kind of complementing search and discovery across the aggregation window.
I think I see a dichotomy here. On the one hand, I'm excited about everything Scott's doing and everything Google's doing, right? I think we see the new Gemini model, the 100 times more powerful than what we used just many months ago. And again, with Google itself and Google Ad Manager, I feel like we do have a better story to tell here because we have integrated stuff. We have the hardware, agents at the pilot. We've been using this for a long time within our Flash, all the way from like, for instance, optimized pricing. Right? We would have never thought of all the AI is how it is. It's just been around for a while, maybe not in front of the users. So that part was exciting for me, but I think the dichotomy is on a standalone basis, we do this, but when it comes to the ecosystem, we're still relying on a bigger solution. Right. And that is very much, it's almost like Scott built this amazing engine, V8 engine or V12 engine, and then tried to retrofit it into a 30-year-old, 40-year-old beater solution car. If you've built, like, I think that's the kind of dichotomy that puzzles me here as to all the things like that talk about, right? Processing data, you don't get that's so means. I think this is where maybe having a underlying data platform that people can trust can probably unlock the power of this and allow us to actually transact in a more free way across the ecosystem.
Rob, I looked at Starz, and they have a product of the sort of Chris Albrecht Oz, the age of the premium cable brand, and I still see that in you, and sort of the editorial control that kind of conveys, and it's in an era where you're with all the distribution relationships that we've described, you don't have that control. It's AI that sort of puts your content, it recommends it to places you may not think of or approve. How is that managed? How does Starz reconcile that kind of algorithmic ranking and recommendation?
I'll start in heated agreement with Zach when he says once you're going that direction, you don't have as much control as you'd like. I mean, there's, with the recommendations, there's almost the canonical problem canonical opportunity with the streaming, with so much choice. So it's something that we've been working on in Starz for a long time. When we have that internal application, when we're working with our DTC customers, there's all kinds of things we can do. We can do content affinity, we can do user characteristics, we can do all these kind of things. And we can use them to, you know, inform what we give our partners and those conversations we have with them. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, here's our metadata, here's what we found and works for it. We would like to be, we would like to be featured on this bundle and whatever that conversation is. I mean, it definitely is not at this point, not strictly a technical solution. It's kind of a marketing and a relationship in there and saying, hey partners, here's what we know about our topic. Here's how you will work with it. There's maybe in this the edge future where we can those kind of things programmatically. We'll get different story, but that's the area.
So I'm going to keep the microphone in your hands for just a second. And we're in the fourth quarter of this, but we could go on for another 40 minutes or 80 or 120 about.
Let's not, please.
Round. You sure? Measurement seems like a complicated gambit. I mean, it's hard enough, I think, when it's just your direct audience, but keeping track of how many people are watching, where, at what time, when your content's everywhere, distributed by, let's talk about that. We didn't sketch out some of the broad shows.
Sure. I mean, it kind of goes to things that both Ravi and Zach have talked about. There's kind of this perfect world where all big players adhere to standards, everybody kind of has a common knowledge pool. There are very strong incentives against them. First party data is amazing to have. Netflix of the world don't necessarily want to give it up, and they have very good reasons for not doing that. But the way Starz has been handling that is kind of going back to, we've got a lot of different places we're in, we've got a lot of different audiences that we can attract with bundles, basically we'll build our systems to say, how can we get the unified view of that Starz consumer? How can we talk to them, and how can we make our systems a level playing field and not really rely on some of the third parties of the world which can tell us that story.
It's funny. I was in the press room, and a couple of my colleagues were just going off on Nielsen, and the VR guy was like 2 feet away.
I didn't want to go there.
No, I didn't want to try to push you there, but they did. I was my badge to stay out of it. But well, I mean, in a world where it's still expecting from SQL source panel optics, what is Google doing of the innovation in there? What can we say in terms of what's nice?
First, I think stepping back, right, again, going back to distributors, so specifically CDN, one of the important trends that happen here, I think, the one word on performance. So we've heard of performance in advertising, but the important change that has happened more recently is that even brand budgets now require some kind of performance measurement. Meaning before brand having leaders in Bannon, they were all about the screen, right? And maybe gender engagement, that's about it. But even now, those brand budgets require some kind of measurement that not like do actual performance. And that means like if a person could be watching TV now, let's just thought of home somewhere, and then could be getting out of the hotel room and then consideration on a mobile phone, and then finally purchase somewhere on a website. And there's nothing behind all this together.
Right.
And I think this is where, when I say we have privacy safe solutions in this EIE, that can be a common currency across these different properties. Again, that's in imagine to mobile plays in CTV, it plays in mobile, and definitely plays on web. And that's where we're trying to create a common identifier that is privacy safe, but works on all of these different disparate data sets to allow complete picture. I think we started with saying nobody knows what the consumer really is doing, but I think this measurement and what is allowing us to at least take a step in that direction versus what's there today.
Gotcha. Well, thanks, Ravi. So I'm just looking at some of the things that you have to keep track of here. It's a list. I'm a little bit out of my depth on it, but I know it's a lot. ACR data, publisher logs, programmatic ad verification signals, just a few things that are on the list. How do you architecture the back end so that bottlenecks don't?
It's in my job, building buildings, delivering power, making and cooling, delivering network is way easier than what these two gentlemen have to do from a data and integration standpoint every day. You just support and service their customers. So credit be you. From our standpoint, they might lead with the first one is that can't start any conversation without security, right? Security first. Increasingly, and I know that that's probably going to be a well-worn tire throughout the conference. Equally important now is putting up the sovereignty. Now we're mixing proprietary content and personal data and VGOs. And what do I do with this? And how do I make sure I'm following regulations? Because those regulations are unfolding in real time. So those architectures are often dictated by local municipalities, rules, GDPR, and others that are forcing us to make sure that we understand how do we effectively manage that overall data. In order to do that, you have to have not just telemetry. Telemetry is important. It's still my understanding. It is vital. It's relevant. But what's critical is that you have programmatic controls. We may not all be there, and I'm not sure that we're there across everything about this as well, but the idea of moving from, understanding to building not just programmatic controls, but autonomous programmatic controls that help keep all of those things in sync. So that's where this industry is going, right? And where we're heading, from a platform capability. The good news is that's now underpinned by performance. So we've never seen anything like this before. You can do new things, new software, new applications, new values created every day, because now we have the ability to reimagine and can actually be delivered. But those things also, fall in the same thing. They have to be operated. They have to be secured, right? They have to be controlled. And so our view on that, and just to make sure that infrastructure layer that is critical to everybody's business, vital to that data exchange, for customers, for partners, their supply chain, as 6 nines or greater availability, and so that we can make other businesses from there. So that's our underlying.
Just under 3 minutes left, and I'll open it up for audience Q&A. Hopefully we have at least one or two good questions. Anybody out the group have anything to ask?
Just sorry, because I'm coming in late, but just how do you deal with this data challenge? How are teams pulling together? And maybe it's for you, Zach, but is it just people downloading? Thank you.
Yeah, Zach.
Yeah. Giving you the tough one. But is it teams that are going, hey, Visio gives us some data, download this? Is it like that kind of manual process, all these spreadsheets, et cetera? Tell us how you're doing it today, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, this is Rob. This is kind of what you were talking about too, right? It's like, we're getting, all this different data. Look, when you got the ad server, a lot of that's kind of standardized and taken care of. But when you're in the content space, every partner is sending different, data in different formats, and you can. I think actually one of the challenges, handling the business side of that, is not such a big deal. And kind of put that into your transaction system and make that make sense, and make sure you're tracking your revenue and stuff. But monitoring the performance of it and trying to make sense of what's actually happening, what the audience is doing, and trying to make that sort of apples to apples across that entire ecosystem. I think that's been a challenge, and having a good data stack and a really good ETL and understanding how to kind of model and lay all that out in a way that's accessible, that you can keep your data democratized across your organization. That's kind of the key to it. So it just takes a lot.
Want to get another? Anybody else?
Yeah, just comment on measurement. That is, in the media world, the most complicated thing. When you're in the legacy TV world, you need the new media world, and basically at the end of the day, you got these types of measurements. It depends on the measurement and how the measurement goes. For instance, on a CTV home screen, you got ad there, clickable or not. And the reality is, that's an ad unit. Right? We've got pause media coming out. We've got plenty of ITV type apps that are within the content, in the window itself. What are you measuring in the squeeze back or hello? Are you measuring, dwell time, straight up impressions? The whole point is, the ad unit itself has a problem getting to a lowest common denominator unless you're trying to force the basic,
Platform, believe it or not, it can be done. Okay, but with other companies else, they've already pulled that off. So I'm just saying, people have to think about money in terms of the actual ad unit itself, the actual ad product itself, and then ultimately how to trace it back to the actual advertiser and what's it really trying to do, whether it's performance, follow tracking, or overly just basically getting a randomly. But in the end, it's all about targeting lockdown. So it's fine out there. And now one of the top piece, we got really good since the demand side goes down.
Well, is there, hey, how do you do this? Is there a question? Because we're really,
I'm just trying to make sure that people understand at the end of the day, the idea of measurement isn't as simple as I think.
And we'll skin is we are going to see that. You pass impression that watches a 5 pixel and then you get the additional version. It's a hell of a lot more complicated today than the government. And it's still you can measure. And you have MRC still out there fighting with Nielsen and all the other companies trying to aggregate, a way to standardize and unify. We're talking UK and then on there. Well, that's an information on way. Right? It's on a very important,
Chip. With that, we're over time here, so I'm going to cut it off here. I want to thank the panel here and turn it over to the next group. Guys, thanks for